leaders. You're actually creating followers, to be honest. And I sometimes think of this as like Old Covenant, New Covenant, like the Old Testament, New Testament. The Old Testament, it was a lot of rule-based governance. If you sin, make an offering, very clear, very transactional relationship, right? Whereas, the new covenant is one more filled with right. Your relationship with him is so paramount, and so we're not scared of God. We appreciate God. In the Old Testament, it was, if you want to stay in God's favor, these are the 10 commandments. If you fail them, here's how you get back on track. Oh, by the way, I've just wiped out Sodom and Gomorrah. Oh, by the way, I just flooded, Noah's Ark era, right? Very clear warnings of, if you're not in line, this is what happens. And I think with intrinsic motivation, I think there's a lot of opportunity to build it. I think you're right. Age plays a huge part into it, but also time. Like, if we walk into a room and it's messy and there's 10 kids in there and they made the mess, I can sit them down and spend 10, 15 minutes explaining to them in sheer anger. I write those and they sit in my draft folder. And if I feel the same way the next day, I'll send it. I've never sent it the next day because I calm down, right? And the key to actually create the intrinsic motivation in the church setting is biblical leadership. So I think a lot of times, what is biblical leadership? Biblical leadership it's leadership, not laziness, right? No matter how inspirational your vision, no matter how great a soundbite you give, people don't care unless they know you care. Talk is cheap. Okay? There's a lot of talkers, very few doers. And that's why, salvation by faith, or works, or both. And that dichotomy that we struggle with between Coptic ideology and other denominations. Faith alone, it's like, imagine someone is a prolific speaker and great sound bites. And you go to them and say, I'm so inspired by you. How can I help those less fortunate you're talking about? And they give you a blank stare. Are you going to listen to them or view their message the same way the next time around? Probably not. Because you're all talk. Right? And this plays into different things, right? It plays into, you tell the youth about fasting, and then they see you, whatever, not fasting. It's a simple enough thing. You tell youth don't drink, and then you're at a wedding doing shots with them. All of a sudden, you've created a lot of confusion. Now, is the issue that they shouldn't drink, Or is the issue that you're not consistent in what you're saying? Right? And what I'll say to you is, depending on the age, there are times where don't open these subjects, right? Because is alcohol a sin?
That's how you consume it.
Is alcohol a sin?
Just drink alcohol normally,
Yes.
like casually, no.
Okay. So as a starting point, it can be and it can't be. When we give absolutes, right? And there's different ages where you have different discussions, right? But the idea is don't let your guard so far down and don't lock yourself so hard into a position that there's no going back, right? We struggle with these things. And they actually, young people are more magnetic to you, the person, not you, the speaker, or, I always say real service starts after your lesson. Go ahead.
But I also think it depends on the age.
Of course.
What age you're serving, because like
Hmm.
I've had, or like I still have Sunday school servants where it's like they're in their mid-30s, having wife and kids, right? And we understand like what's around. It's okay to, even if it's a sin, like it's okay to drink with your family and events, stuff like that. Like as you grow up, you realize like they're still human at the end of the day. I understand with young kids where you're supposed to find that barrier, but like I think the older you get with them, the more open you have to be with those.
No, for sure. The problem is we lock now.
What you're saying is don't tell them it's a complete sin to drink and then
Well, you know what? I would just say it in a slightly different way. Guys, be very careful. There's a lot of things at your age that you can't control yourself. Because we unfortunately elevate, or we have created in our minds a hierarchy of sins that isn't existent, right? Sexuality, alcohols, drugs, whatever it is. We're very like we view some sins worse than others. Subconsciously, and as a result, our reactions are more visceral to them. Now, if a kid comes to me, and it depends on the age, right? Because you're not going to do shots with a grade 8.
Yeah.
Okay. But I'd also say, is doing shots more on the extreme side of alcohol consumption than a glass of wine from a moderation perspective, right? Because that's the delicate, like that is the conversation. And do you see like the depth we're talking about? This is the effort because this is where we need to engage in these discussions. Go
I
ahead.
mean, I think easier where it's like I went to weddings like as I got older, like in like I'm 14 now, so let's say like around my second year, where I saw my Sunday school teacher before me take shots, which like I found completely normal. I didn't look at them any different.
How old were you?
21 now, I was 19.
You were 19. And was the discussion, were you, and it depends, were they in a room telling you drinking is a sin?
They were telling me how you drink is a sin. Like it's like like so if you take a wine glass, you're at a dinner, that's not a sin. It's a sin when you alter your body or your state of mind. That's what they always think. That's why weed is a sin, because you're altering your state of mind or you're altering your body. But then if you take one glass of wine, it's not a sin, you're just drinking, just alcohol. But if you take
Sure.
multiple, you're altering your state of mind, which can be
And that is a distinction for sure. So I think what I'm trying to say is don't lock yourself into positions but understand also you have to be speaking with an appropriateness to the age group you're encountering. So if someone like is drinking a sin, instead of saying, the easy answer is to say yes, right? Because you don't want to explain yourself to a grade 8. But what you would say is our body is a temple of God. We need to make decisions about our body that always make God proud. And the real answer to grade 8 is this conversation is too early for you anyways, because it's illegal for you to drink.
they're already like participating in investing and they're asking.
No, for sure. No, I'm agreeing with you. But I think right away, there's nothing to talk. No, but guys, right away, let's call very transparent. I can't talk to a grade 8 about drinking. It's illegal. You're not allowed to drink.
No, you don't, like, it's not, but they're not coming at you in a legal point of view.
It doesn't matter. Because you actually, like, if you think about it just from a moral authority perspective, you actually can't engage with a minor on alcohol.
So then how do they talk to them?
No. What I'm saying is, in that moment in time, it's like, guys, there's really nothing to engage on. You're not supposed to be drinking. Well, I am. Well, it's illegal. And you understand what happens if you get caught drinking. The person giving them the alcohol, because it's almost like are you acquiescing or facilitating? Because that's actually a very interesting question, right? Because that age group, the answer is very easy. It's illegal for you to drink. It's also illegal for you to take your parents' car keys and drive a car. It's illegal for you to do a lot of things.
But like, you like, you telling them don't do it, it's gonna make them do it more. It's one of those ones, it's like
But I think what you're missing is, in that moment, you have a bigger problem. The fact that a kid in grade 8 is drinking, there is actually a bigger issue at stake, right? Because this isn't actually church-based. This is society more broadly based, right? And that's where, because that's a person where you actually have to take the conversation offline and understand what that person is struggling with directly, right? Because you almost, and that's why asking questions, does anyone have any questions? Very dangerous, right? Especially when you don't know what's going to come back at you, because it kind of creates, the younger they are, and the communal legal standards do play into it, right? Because that person's not just consuming alcohol. That person actually could get in much bigger problem, or the people around him could get in like, parents might not be aware, but the parents could ultimately be responsible for that. And you can explain, like, the reason for me, why am I being so adamant about the legal versus illegal? Because it's actually factual. It's so much more dangerous. The stakes are so much higher.
it's illegal until you're in grade 12, until you turn 18 legally. So it's like you can't have that conversation with them until if they're entering high school, especially high school. That's when it's more broad, especially with weed now being legal. It's more exposed.
Because weed was more readily available too.
Now it's easier.
What?
Now it's just easier.
Yeah,
if I'm in time of trouble. Because at the end of the day, like kids are gonna be kids and they're gonna do whatever they want. You can't really control a kid. So it's like I'm not encouraging them like, oh yeah, it's okay to do it, because I don't think it's okay to do it. But they're gonna do it regardless. So make sure to at least give them a word of advice or something to kind of like, if they do it, you can like they can you can help them.
Maybe say something like, if you're tempted to do it, if you feel like you're going to do it, give me a call and we can talk about it.
Yeah, I think you want to keep a door open. I think it's more difficult when they're younger, for sure, right? Because you can never be seen to be sort of giving them a roadmap of almost like how to do it if they do it, right? I think what you do is you warn them about the risks. Just say, look, a lot of things go sideways. You're young, your body's transforming. You shouldn't be drinking. And if you do and you drink too much, it's not just the alcohol that's a problem. It's like everything else when you lose control. You give them those warnings, but I think this is not a moderation age. This isn't
I'm
an
more like high school, like even grade 11, like grade 11.
yeah, for sure. I mean, as they get older, but we were talking about grade 8, I think like moderation, you start getting into those discussions as they get closer to the age of majority, right? But when they're too young, see, like we can't be scared. Here's the thing. We can't be scared to say no, but saying no is just the beginning of your journey of creating the follow-up with them. A lot of times we say no and we think our job is finished, but that's actually the first step. And then it's the follow-up, right? Um, and it's almost like I will never go into the moderation discussion until the age is appropriate, but I will go into, do you understand the risks? It's not just because not everything comes in the form of sin or not sin. The risk is when you're out of control, do you know what you're going to do?
If you think of moderation, you wouldn't be at those risks. That makes sense.
Yeah, but you don't start with moderation. You always start with people in the extremes and then bring it to moderation, right? Because if you're always starting moderation, all of us think we have more control than we do, right? So it's almost retracing and pulling it back. That's the tact in how to address these issues, right? Um,
When are these topics open for discussion?
I mean, it depends on the program and it depends on the youth. Yeah, I'm sure there is. Like we're talking about sexuality, we're talking about a lot of things these days, and more. You know, they dragged me to talk to grade 3 and 4 about same-sex marriage, right? Like, what is marriage? What is, divine design? Like, what? So these issues are coming up at younger ages, right? When weed got legalized, a lot of confusion, right? Because all of a sudden it's like, and you're getting into the discussion of what is legal is not right, right? Like it's just going back to St. Paul. So these things do come up, right? Um, and they come up there's almost like a predictable cycle with it, you know, in the grade 12s around prom, a natural opportunity to talk about, right? As you're getting closer to prom and parties and this and that. And it's not like you come in and say, hey, we're going to talk about, alcohol today. It could come up in what are social pressures we're dealing with, right? And it gives you that flexibility to handle the issues. So it does come up, and we can't shy away from addressing these topics. After I spoke to the grade 3s and 4s about marriage, a couple servants came out and they're like, you were so direct. And I was like, I'm sorry, like, what do you mean? Like, you just kept saying marriage is a man and a woman. And I said, I didn't say it. The Bible said it. Like, I don't, you know, but at the same time, we sometimes lack, back to the word, grace, right? We're very quick to pick on Leviticus. We'll use like Leviticus as the gold standard of so there's all these different, like, the challenges are shifting. Like the amount of transgender related issues that came up this past June was like, it wasn't Pride Month, it was like Trans Month, really, it was very dominant. So we have to be adaptive, we have to be responsive. And the other thing too is, don't be scared if it's a subject you're uncomfortable handling. The last thing you want to do is start a subject you can't handle. Talk to someone else in your peers, talk to Abuna, talk to other servants and say, hey, who can speak about this subject? I know what's right and wrong. I'm just worried if I get a question, I won't know how to handle it. And that's okay. So yeah, so I mean, these are definitely, they're definitely issues we're dealing with. And they come up in different, because some of these guys and girls are not into, it's not alcohol that's their thing, it's sex, it's drugs, it's whatever. Like everyone has a different vice, but it all comes down to sort of what is driving, what is the underlying tension that they're dealing with, is insecurity, finding themselves, discovering themselves, pressure, right? So, you know, it's more that approach, but we have to deal with these issues. So sorry if we went sideways on that, but intrinsic motivation, what you want to do is respect, not rule, right? How do you create how do you motivate? We talked about extrinsic motivation is usually short-lived and doesn't create, it's not sustainable. So the more people grow to respect each other and respect the process and grow together, the more sustained they are in continuing beyond those momentary views of, and then trust, not trepidation. Biblical leadership is one built on trust, not fear. The more we grow in trust, the more we love each other, the more there is this, you know, genuine agape love in ministry, the more we foster and create these positive relationships. Invite feedback, avoid criticism. You know, a lot of times we're very quick to shout and scream. Doesn't change the facts. Facts are the facts. Whatever's happens, happens. Will yelling change any of it? No, it won't. So the first is biblical leadership and really focusing on that. The second is developing a motivating environment. God's glory, not mine. If we're doing everything for God, not for me, people will work harder. But if at the end of the day, Peter is the shining star of every event, how many people are going to work with me? Very few. Aspire for excellence, not perfection. Aspire for excellence. Don't cut corners. Put in the same intensity you put into your work, into your service. Service doesn't get your leftover time. And that's why last week when we talked about management and we talked about priority management, if you know you can only give X percent or X amount of time per week, no problem. Pick up tasks that you're going to do excellent in that amount of time, than saying yes to everything and doing nothing. And leaders have to lead. The hardest working person should be the person leading, right? using motivating language. We talked about using words, gratitude, thank you, that type of thing. What do you think?
I think also admitting to it's
I'm sorry is so powerful.
not towards someone that you're working with, but say like, sorry, I overlooked this, or
But I think what you're saying is something really important because you said not you're working with. The first honesty, the first degree of honesty has to be with yourself. You said it without saying it. You start with yourself. You have to be honest with yourself. You have to be honest with your shortcomings. Because before you can actually evaluate a fact pattern, you have to be very self-aware. Look, I'll be very honest with you guys. There are times where, you know, years ago, someone would say, oh, can you give a talk on this day? I would say yes to everything. And I would look and I'd be like, I wouldn't feel ready in my head because I didn't have the time and I should have said no. And over time, that honesty with myself saying, I'm not doing anyone a service just because I string a few words together. That's not, you know. So being self-aware with yourself is so important. And you have to start there. Don't start by looking and saying, all these guys screwed up. You know, how can they let me down? Like, so if everyone did bad, what does it say about you? Sorry guys, it's my phone, it's just going nuts. I'm just gonna put it. Yeah. Mhm.
If you're saying yes because multiple people are coming to you saying, we need help, whatever it is. Like the service needs help, not necessarily your help, but needs help. And that's a refrain you're hearing from many, many different places. So you feel guilty about not saying yes. How do you navigate that?
What would happen if you weren't available? If you moved, if work or school took you to another country, will the service continue?
Yeah, they'll find someone else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So don't feel guilty. That's the thought of the devil. As crazy as it is, what is the easiest thing for the devil to do? Is to bog you down into two things. First, you're going to do it subpar, or you're going to throw in the towel because you're overworked. Best outcome for him, less people to do. I know it sounds so like minuscule but it's true. Boundary setting isn't one, you're asking the question from a place of integrity, because you wouldn't be asking it if I can serve or I can go play video games, because you wouldn't ask that question. You're asking because you're genuinely concerned you don't have the time. And I would advocate that